Welcome back. In this video, we will take all of the images that we scanned or we downloaded, and we'll put them into Paintshop Pro, and we'll get them ready to go into AnyRail. And this is probably what most of you wanted to see in the first place, not all that other stuff in the other two videos. But anyway, here we go with the good stuff. So the first track plan we're going to work with is the Red Rock Northern. Now I have two copies of the Red Rock Northern. One of them is a PDF as it came from the Model Railroader website. And the other one is a JPEG image that we printed out on our printer. Now I don't know what software you have. I'm most familiar with Paintshop Pro because I've been using it for a couple of decades now, I think. But hopefully some of the stuff I show you here will translate into whatever program you're using. So let's start with the PDF. Now there are a couple of ways that I can bring the PDF into Paintshop Pro. The first way is just go to Open, select my PDF from my file folder, and hit Open. Now when I do this, it opens up this box here and it asks me some questions. And the one I'm concerned about is the resolution. And the default is 72 dots per inch, but that's going to look awful if we bring it in at 72 dpi. So we're going to change that to 300, but watch what happens. The memory required is 1.8 megabytes, for 72 dpi. When we go to 300 dpi, now goes up to 32 megabytes, but the difference in size is well worth it. So then we just hit OK. And there we go. Now the other way I can bring this in is to do this. I can just grab the file and drag it over and open it that way. And let's do that with the image that we printed out and then we scanned using our scanner. So what we'll do is I'll just drag that, bring it over here, and there we go. This is our printed image that we scanned, and this is our PDF that we downloaded off the web. And now I can zoom in on this, and you can see I can get in really tight on it, and the quality still looks pretty good. So there are a couple things I want to do to this drawing. First of all, I want to crop out just the track plan here. I don't want the walls showing. Secondly, I want to make this holding track a separate image. So we will remove that as well. And thirdly, no offense to the fine two gentlemen standing here looking at the railroad, but I really don't want them in the final image. So we're going to take them out as well. Now, just like I've told you for AnyRail and everything else, I am not an expert at any of these programs. Everything I do in here is stuff that I figured out and it works for me. There are people out there who know how to use Photoshop and other programs like that, and they are just complete wizards at it. I am not. I'm not even an apprentice at it. But by the time I'm done, I get the results that I want. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to save this. And I'm just going to save this as a JPEG. And what I'm going to do, and the reason I'm doing this is because I want a couple of different copies, and I don't want to mess up my original copy. So I'm going to save this as the Red Rock Northern main track plan. Hit save. Okay, so now I have an extra copy of it. So the first thing I'm going to want to do here is I'm going to want to crop out just the track plan image. So let's go to crop. And let's drag the box down. Let's take a look at what we've got here. So that's pretty close to the inside of the walls. Now we'll come up here. And we'll come in and we'll take a look at this. And right now I can see that my crop is not going to be exact. That means my image has rotated a little bit in the scan from horizontal. So that's not going to work. So let's go over here. Let's escape out of the crop. I'm going to go to View, and I'm going to turn on the grid. I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to look at this. And sure enough, you can see on the grid it's a little smaller over here than it is here. So we're going to want to rotate this image. Let's look at the edges just as. What do we got on the edge? Here's our line. Yep, it's off. All right. Now, I don't know how far I have to rotate this. So I'm going to do a Control R, and that brings up Rotate in this program. And I'm going to select Free. I'm going to select Right because I want to bring this edge down. So I've got it set to 0.2. Let's see what happens. Fortunately, it recenters the image. A little bit better. Let's do another one. That was a little bit too far. Let's go left, 0.1 in, 0.1 degree. Now we're looking good. Let's check our edge over here. We're on this line right here, so let's follow it down. Pretty close. I think that's about as close as we're going to get. All right. So now we have rotated the image and made it straighter. It's lining up with the grid. Actually, I hate the grid, so I'm going to get rid of that. Now let's try our crop tool again. Let's come in here. Now let's zoom in. Sometimes in Paintshop Pro, it bounces around like that. It doesn't zoom in around where your cursor is. Drives me crazy, but I've learned to live with it. Try and get that on the edge there. And you'll notice we're much closer over here. We're not going to lose a lot of information. So let's try and get that edge lined up. Basically, I want to get rid of all the gray. Okay, let's go down to the bottom. How do we do down here? Not too bad. You can see we're off over here. Now, what is that caused from? I don't know. I could go in and rotate a little bit more, but I don't think it's worth it. So I'm going to just line that up on there. I'm going to pull this in just a tiny bit because, like I said, I don't mind if I lose a little bit of the track plan because it's scenery out there. Who cares? That looks good. Going to lose a little bit right there. I'm not worried about that. There's our image, and we can use that in AnyRail, but we're going to make a few more changes to it. Now, I already have this named, so I'm just going to come up and I'm going to hit Save. Now I have this image ready to go. Now, here's where other people might have better ideas, but what I'm going to do is I am just going to clone these guys out. And I don't really care about the grid because I'm going to be expanding this in the XY dimensions. So this grid doesn't really tell me anything. If you're going to keep it the same size, you're going to lose a little bit of the grid, but it's not going to really bother you. So what I'm going to do, and this is just, I want to do this quickly. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I'd rather start designing my railroad than, playing around in Paintshop Pro. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here. I'm going to sample that area. And you can see the RGB is 255, 255, 255. So that's pure white. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select my clone brush. I'm going to set the clone brush to a little bit more than that. Let's try 35 pixels. That looks good. Select the area that I want to copy over, and I'm just going to start removing this poor guy out of there. And I'll do the same for the other one down below. And I will probably do the same for the staging track. So let's go ahead and get that done. Okay, so we're done cleaning up the inside of our drawing. We got rid of the holding track drawing here, and we also got rid of those two poor guys. They're gone but not forgotten. And you'll notice that, the grid is missing here and there, but there's still enough of the grid that, you can use it if you want to build the track plan to the exact same size. I went a little farther than normal. I came up here and I took out the poor guy's hand. It didn't seem right to erase him and leave a disembodied hand sitting there, so I took that out. All right, so there is our first track plan. It's ready to go. So we'll come up here and we will hit save. And it's ready. Now let's get the holding track. So what we're going to do here is we're going to lose that. And I'm going to come up and I'm going to open our original drawing. Now I can open it this way and drag it in this way. Or I can also grab it from my file folder and just drag the image in. And let's do it that way. So now we want to get rid of everything except the holding track. And this poor guy is going to get erased again. Now, when we did the original crop, we had to rotate to the right 0.3 degrees. So let's just do that right off the bat here. And we're just going to rotate it 0.3 degrees to the right. And we're going to hope that that's correct. All right. Let's zoom in. Let's grab our crop tool. And of course the crop tool is off the screen, so let's go out, drag it, get it roughly in place. And we'll take a look, see what we got. I'm just going to go to the black lines, and it looks like 0.3 degrees was just about right, doesn't it? Come down here. We're off a little bit here. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to bring that up, and then I'm going to come back up here, and I'm going to check this edge. So I'm going to pull it in like that. That looks fairly good. Now, the problem with doing it this way is that when you expand this back to the size that you want, it's going to be off a little bit. Mine is off a tiny bit. These 2 points don't line up properly with the upper level. But for me, it's not a big deal. I just sort of work around it. So let's hit crop. Let's look at the whole drawing. And there we go. And let's make this guy go away again. And I think I'll get rid of this as well. So we'll just clone everything out. So let's go do that. And there we go. And now we'll just come up here and we'll save it. And we'll just call it yes, I want to continue. Thank you. And we're done with that one. Okay, so we have our Red Rock Northern set to go into AnyRail. Now, I'm not going to show you, but you can do the exact same things that I showed you for the Red Rock Northern for this track plan here. And I really like this track plan. If I had the room, I think I would build something like that. And this one also has the staging tracks down here. So what you would do on this one is I would ignore this angle. And this angle here where it comes out. And I would just crop a square like that. And then you could change this if you want. I mean, this is specific to this room here. So a lot of rooms you would probably just go straight down like that and change your track work a little bit there. And then on the staging tracks, you would just crop like that and follow this edge here. Ignore that wall of the room and just crop like that. And of course, you want to make sure that this is on the true horizontal when you crop it. And you can do that, well, you can see it like we did on the other one. You use the crop box. You can see if it's off if you zoom in on it. Or you can come up and you could put a grid into your drawing. And that'll give you a good idea if it's off. And if you look at it up here, it is indeed off. It's going to have to be rotated again to the right. And I'm not going to do this one. This is an easy one. You would just crop it like I showed you. Check and make sure it's horizontal. One thing you might want to do on this one is you might want to come up and just change the brightness and contrast on it a little bit. And that doesn't look very good, does it? Let's go to default. And just lighten it up a little bit so it would be easier to see everything. Okay, so let's take a look at track plans that scan 2 pages, and that's where it gets really interesting and a lot of fun. So I've reset Paintshop Pro, and let's start with the plan from Model Railroader magazine. So we're going to drag that guy in, and there it is. So let's rotate it and make it a little bit larger. Now, what we're going to do here is we are going to have to cut each section out. So we'll cut this one out, then we'll cut this one out, and then we'll reassemble it into another image. So I'm going to have to set up another image that we can copy this one into. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to go New from Template. And let's see if I have any templates that look like it might work. I have a bunch of templates for my website, Steam Powered Radio. So let's see what we got here. Let's try this one, 12 by 24. Now you want to make your template bigger than what your image is going to be because it's just easier to see. And also I use a blue background sometimes because it makes the image that you're putting in stand out. So let's go over here. And we're going to zoom in on this. And now let's cut this out. Now you'll notice it has the jagged pieces here where it goes together. And I'm not going to waste my time trying to save those jagged pieces. It's pretty obvious that the track goes from here to here. So let's not worry about that. Let's crop this guy and see what we get. First of all, let's see if it's straight when we put the crop tool up. Actually, that doesn't look too bad along there, does it? I think we might get away with this one. It's leaning a little bit here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this out because I want to keep the entire, as much as of the railroad as I can. So I'm going to pull that out there. But down here, it's not looking too bad. It is off a little bit. If you follow the blue line here, I have a little more white showing under the blue line. Also, I have a little more right here than I do up here. So I'm going to come out like that. I'm just going to make a compromise here, but I'm right on the edge here. So I'm going to hit OK. And there we go. Now I'm going to come up here and I am going to say copy. Then come over to my new image. And I'm going to say paste as new layer. And there it is. And you'll notice over here on my layers, I now have a new raster layer. So I can now move this guy around a little bit. Okay, so now we have one half of our railroad. I'm going to go back to our scan, and I'm simply going to say undo. And now I have my original drawing back. Now you could always make 2 copies of the drawing if you wanted to, but I always find it's easier just to say undo and then come back and crop again. So now we're going to crop again. Move the crop box over. And then I'm going to drag it like this. And we're going to include this hidden area here for the staging. All right, and let's move this part out just a tiny bit, right? Like that. Okay, that looks good too. We'll hit apply. We're going to come up. We're going to copy. We're going to come over here. And for Paintshop Pro, I always like to get out of the crop tool when I'm doing something like this. So I just come up here and I select the pick tool. All right. Edit. Paste as new layer. And there it is. Now obviously I made my new image way too big. So we can get rid of that. We'll come in here. We'll make it something a little more reasonable. We still want it to be bigger so we can move things around. There we go. So that's looking really good. I like this. So let's come up here. I want to use the move tool. I want to move this side over here. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to select that layer. And now I'm just going to line them up. Let's zoom in on that a little bit. Now, just like in AnyRail, I can nudge a layer up and down using my arrow keys. But that looks really good. I'm happy with that. I don't see any need to rotate anything on this one. I mean, it's possible that it's off a little bit up here, but I really don't see a need to rotate. So let's crop it again. Yeah, it is off a bit, isn't it? Actually, I'm not sure that it's off. It's more like the pages don't line up. The printed pages, the image on the printed page don't line up here. Because you'll notice our track looks pretty good. Let's drag this down and crop to there. And look here. Yeah, it is so close. It is so close, I wouldn't worry about it. For me, I think I would just crop it like that, take off this little bit that's on this side, and then I would worry about it later on. Now, I left a little bit of blue here, so I'm going to crop again. So stand by, let me do that. And I just realized I really don't want this area out here. We want to crop to right there. There's our railroad. Now we want to save this back as a JPEG because we'll be using it as a JPEG to put it into AnyRail. But before I do that, I want to save it in Paintshop Pro's native format. And the reason I'm going to do that is That way I retain all of my layers. When I make it a JPEG, it's going to flatten it down and it's going to make it one layer. So I'm going to have two copies of this. I'm going to have it in what's called a .psp format, and that's the one that will retain the layers. That means if I want to, I can come back later on and I can then work on each layer separately. So let's go up here. I'm going to say save as. I'm going to put it as a PSP. And what's the name of this? There we go. And it will come up as a .psp, but I always put in PSP there just to remind me. Okay, now I'm going to save it as a JPEG. I'll hit save, and it comes up and it says, because of the limitations of the specified file format and possibly the save options you've selected, the saved file will be limited to a merged image. Would you like to continue? Yes, yes I would. So now if I close this out and I go grab that as a JPEG, bring it back in, there's our JPEG, but you'll notice it's only one layer now. If I grab the PSP image, there are all my layers, and I can work on them separately. I can turn them off. I can do whatever I want to them. I can even rotate the layers separately. If I come back and I say, well, you know, it's a little off, I need to rotate that. I could come in and I could rotate them separately. So that's why I always like to save an image that I put together in both its native format, in this case it's PSP, and as a JPEG. Okay, so let's look at the other track plan that we scanned, and that one is the one that is missing a little bit of information, and we'll see how that one comes out. But overall, I'm quite happy with the way this one came out. Okay, so I've reset Paintshop Pro again, and we're basically going to do the same thing we did last time, but I just want to show you a little bit about this offset one. All of the things that I showed you on the previous example will work with this one. But let's go through this one anyway. And while I was thinking about this, I decided to scan another track plan because I want to show you just one other way that you can put the track plans together. And this is something I use when I'm doing schematics. And it's not because I like the sound of my voice, but I keep coming up with things that I think might be interesting to show you. So I'm going to do one more after this, and I apologize for that in advance. Anyway, let's get going on this one. So once again, we will come up here and we will make a blank drawing. And I'm just going to use that 12 by 24 blue template again. And I don't know if you noticed, but on my templates, I have the resolution set to the same thing that I'm scanning at. And I think that's fairly important to remember to do that. You'll notice it makes a pretty big file, but like I said, the quality is worth it. Okay, let's come back here. Now this is the last scan that I made, and this is the one I made using the foam core, pressing down really hard, and you can see how flat I got the binding here. So that looks really, really nice. I don't have any cleanup to do. There's no dark lines, anything like that. So we can just come in here and we can cut this. So let's go ahead and crop. Now we'll copy this, come to our blank drawing. Let's lose that. And we're going to paste it as a new layer. And over here you can see in our layers panel, here's my new raster layer. So I am going to select move here, and I'm going to move this over. All right, I'll come back to this one. We'll do a Control Z and undo. And we'll crop the other side. And you can see it's off a tiny bit here. I'm not sure if I'm going to worry about that or not. Let's take a look at this down here. How is it lining up down here? And it's off a tiny bit. We're going to have to rotate this page a little bit. And I think we're going to do it here on this drawing instead of doing it on the separate layer. So let's try rotating. And we're going to rotate to the right. And let's just start with our old friend here, 0.3 degrees. See what happens. That doesn't look bad there. Let's draw our box. And it looks like I got lucky here. It's really close. I see a little bit where it's off here, but I think that is going to be close enough. There we go. All right. Let's select our Move tool. And we're just going to come in here. And let's look at the middle of it. Now that doesn't look bad there at all, does it? Now I have this side of the drawing selected, that layer selected, so I can use my up-down arrows and move it just a little bit each way. But nope, it looks pretty good. Let's go up. A little bit off up here, and that could be the result of the scan, way it's scanned, or the way it was printed originally in the magazine. Let's look at it down here. Here we go. Now see, these tracks line up pretty good here. And here's what I was talking about losing information. Here's that tank, and you'll notice that it is an ellipse, and it's also not lining up properly. That's because, you know, when they folded the pages to put the book together, it didn't get folded right on the center line. Let's go back up here. See, these tracks look good here, but up at the top here, we're off, and we're off just a tiny bit. I mean, I wouldn't worry about that. Now, you'll also notice that this side, its layer, is overlapping this one. Now, I can come over here and see which looks better. I can come over here and I can grab the layer for the right side, pull it down. So now, this side is overlapping, the left side is overlapping the right side. And it really didn't change anything much, did it? Let's go down here. Looks pretty much the same. Looks pretty much the same. I'm going to put it back. Just pull that layer up. Yeah, I kind of like it that way. So there's our railroad. Now all we have to do is crop this. We'll hit crop. You notice we got a little bit of blue down there. Sometimes you have to go back and crop it again. But for the most part, this looks really, really nice. And what we'll do is we'll do like we did with the other plan. We will save it in both the native format for my program here, which is .psp, and we'll save it as a JPEG for an image that we can drag into AnyRail. All right, now let's look at that bonus drawing, and I'll show you something a little bit about overlapping images. So I'm going to reset Paintshop Pro once again. Okay, so here's our bonus track plan, and I'm going to show you this only in case you run across a track plan that spans 2 pages, is lined up pretty nicely like this one is, and has a lot of track work where you're going to be splicing the sections together. So I'm going to show you a trick that will work with a track plan, and I use this a lot when I'm putting schematics together. And it involves using the layers and adjusting the transparency of the layers. So if that situation doesn't apply to you, then I suggest you skip this part of the video. So here's my track plan. It lines up fairly well up here, good enough for my demonstration. So let's go ahead and open our other drawing that we're going to put this into. Okay, now I'm going to grab two pieces of this drawing. And normally you would like grab it where it's spliced together. But what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to crop it this way. Here's the center of the book, and that's where we've been cutting the previous examples. But this time I'm going to overlap a tiny bit like that. Say OK. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to paste it in as a layer. In my program, that's Control L. Come back here. Undo that. I'm going to move my crop box over like this. And as you can see, I'm not being very accurate because I just want to do this quickly just to show you how this works. And again, I'm going across the center. So I've got a little bit of this drawing now. Grab that one. Do a Control C. Come over here. Do a Control L. I now have my two sections. So let me drag those apart. And I'm going to zoom in here because this is where we want to work. And now I could come in and I could do that and line it up that way. Or line it up that way where it looks good. But one thing I can do is I can take this right-hand piece, and here's the layer for the right-hand piece, and I can come up here and I can change the opacity. And I like to work somewhere around 57 to 62, depending on the drawing. Let's see how that looks. Now I'll drag it over like that. And now I can see through that top layer. And I can keep moving that layer until I get it to just about where I want it to be. And then I can use my arrow keys and line it up. Now, in the scan itself, this is kind of bad up here, but this is the section I'm looking at right here. And as you can see, it lines up perfectly. So if I had a lot of complicated track going through here, by turning down the opacity on this layer and then moving it over this layer, I can see through this one on the right hand side and line it up perfectly over here. And then when I'm done, just turn it back up to 100. And there's my track plan. So that's a good way to line up two images if there's a lot of complicated track work or anything else at the point where you need to splice them together. And one other quick thing. Here is the original image for this track plan as I scanned it. And this was the best scan I could get out of it because the book is kind of thick and the page is folded over here. Even pressing down with my foam core, this was the best thing that I could get. But when I was done, I cleaned it up like this. And basically what I did, just in case you ever want to clean up a drawing, is I used my clone brush over here, took a sample of what I wanted to clone in, used my clone brush. I removed a lot of things that way. I also used my flood fill, and I would just come in here and I would select an area and do that. That gets rid of a lot of it pretty darn quick. You have to be careful. There are settings up here for tolerance and how it matches. And sometimes you will click in an area and it will take a long time and it will remove information from your image. But you can do that pretty quick like that and clean it up. And then I went a little bit crazy. I zoomed in with my clone brush and I was doing things like I was copying areas and brushing it over. But if you want to, and you have a need to do that, you can actually clean up a drawing pretty nicely like that. Okay, well that took a lot longer than I thought it was going to, so if you watched all of this, I appreciate it, and if you skipped around, I don't blame you. So I'll leave you with this nice picture of Boca, California from about 1910, and I'll see you in the next video.